In September 2025, Nepal witnessed one of the most dramatic uprisings in its modern history, a rebellion that shook the very foundations of its political order and captured global attention as thousands of young people, mostly belonging to Generation Z, poured into the streets of Kathmandu and other major cities, demanding change, justice, and dignity in a society they felt had betrayed them. And while the immediate trigger for this eruption was the government's abrupt decision to ban popular social media platforms under the pretext of curbing misinformation and fake accounts, the deeper causes were rooted in years of disillusionment with endemic corruption, lack of jobs, rising inequality, and the widening gulf between political elites and ordinary citizens. So when the ban was announced in early September, it was perceived not as a minor regulatory move, but as an attempt by the state to silence dissent, control expression, and cut off the very platforms where young Nepalese found community, opportunity, and voice. And on September 8, protests ignited spontaneously with students, workers, and ordinary youth marching through the capital carrying placards that read, "Shut down corruption, not social media, and it's our turn now." And the atmosphere quickly escalated from peaceful chanting to confrontation as security forces deployed tear gas, water cannons, and rubber bullets. But the determination of the crowd only grew, and by the end of the day, violence had erupted in multiple districts, with reports confirming that at least 19 people had lost their lives and hundreds more were injured in clashes that turned once busy streets into battlegrounds. Yet rather than dissipating, the protests swelled further on September 9, fueled by grief, anger, and the widespread belief that the government had crossed a line from incompetence into outright oppression. So demonstrators stormed major state buildings, including the Singha Durbar Administrative Complex, the Supreme Court, and even the Prime Minister's official residence at Baluwata, setting fire to offices, smashing symbols of authority, and chanting for an end, not only to the ban, but also to the system of political nepotism and corruption that they believed had robbed them of a future. And as the fires raged, the legislature building, Nepal's International Convention Center, was engulfed in flames, while the homes of high-ranking officials and party headquarters were vandalized and torched, transforming the heart of Kathmandu into a war-zone-like landscape. And in a matter of hours, what began as a protest against social media restrictions had morphed into a full-blown youth rebellion demanding systemic change. And Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli, a seasoned but controversial figure in Nepal's politics, found his authority crumbling as images of chaos spread internationally despite the government's attempts to suppress coverage. And under immense pressure and the growing threat to his personal safety, he announced his resignation on September 9, retreating under military protection to an army barracks, an act that, instead of calming the nation, only emboldened the protesters, who saw his departure not as the end of their struggle, but as the first victory in a broader fight to reclaim their nation from what they described as a corrupt generation of leaders. Yet Oli's fall left a dangerous power vacuum, and in the absence of political leadership, the Nepalese army stepped in, deploying soldiers to patrol the capital, guard critical infrastructure, and enforce a strict, indefinite curfew, while armored vehicles rolled through streets still smoldering from fires set the previous night. And though the government swiftly lifted the social media ban in an effort to appease the protesters, the measure came too late to quell the fury, as by then the rebellion had already claimed more than 25 lives, injured hundreds, and shattered the perception that Nepal's fragile democracy was stable, with protesters continuing to defy curfews, block roads, occupy airports, and call for deeper reforms, including a new constitution and the dissolution of the current legislature. And the rebellion highlighted the generational divide in Nepal. On one side, young people frustrated by unemployment, inflation, and lack of opportunities, who also resented the dominance of Nepo kids and political dynasties that controlled the country's institutions. And on the other side, entrenched elites who sought to preserve their privileges through censorship and suppression, creating a combustible situation that exploded when the government attempted to cut off the very digital lifeline that kept young Nepalese connected to the wider world. And while international observers expressed concern and called for restraint, with neighboring India and China closely monitoring events that could destabilize the Himalayan region, the rebellion continued to burn like a fire difficult to extinguish, fueled by a mixture of grief, rage, and hope. And though soldiers maintained a tense grip on the capital, reports from across the country suggested that the rebellion had spread beyond Kathmandu, with demonstrations erupting in Pokhara, Biratnagar, and smaller towns where young people echoed the same demands for jobs, transparency, and accountability. And as September 10 unfolded, it became clear that the events of those 2 days were not merely another episode in Nepal's turbulent political history, but a turning point, as a new generation made it clear that they would not accept silence or submission, and that they were prepared to risk everything for a future free from corruption and oppression, leaving behind a landscape of burned buildings, shattered trust, and a profound uncertainty about what would come next, yet also planting the seeds of a movement that might one day reshape Nepal's democracy in the image of its restless, angry, but hopeful youth.